Today, I'm going to be going over everything you need to know to make a song like this. So that was a little clip of my latest release, Cosmic Cushion, which I dropped under my LoFi moniker, Moat. I make a lot of sleepy, ambient, relaxing LoFi music over there. So if that's your style, definitely go check it out. Give me a follow on Spotify or Apple Music or wherever you'd like to listen. I'm dropping new music pretty frequently, so definitely check me out over there. But if you want to learn to make this type of music yourself, I've got a few tips for you, and I think we're going to get into it today. I do want to say this video is going to be focused pretty primarily on the production side of things, but not so much on the actual composition. So if you want to see a video where I go into the composition or the music theory behind making sleepy lo-fi, definitely leave a comment, let me know. I'd be happy to make a video like that for you guys if there's any interest in the future. But anyway, let's get into how I made Cosmic Cushion and what I think you guys need to know if you want to make something like this yourself. Here we've got the project file for Cosmic Cushion. You can see it's actually really simple. I think one of my philosophies with this genre in particular is that less can often be more. You know, having space in your mix and simplicity can really do a lot to allow a listener to create the emotion themselves rather than you trying to force it on them with too many sounds, too much melodic content. That being said, I do have plenty of songs that get crowded and busy, but that's besides the point. But yeah, if you're looking to start making a sleepy or relaxing lo-fi song, I highly recommend starting just about the same way I start any type of music, and that's just finding a chord progression and building a loop around it. In this case, I got started with Spitfire Audio. They've got this awesome free plugin with tons of different sounds, and this stock one that comes up when you open the plugin is a soft piano. It's really, I need headphones on so I can hear what I'm doing. So yeah, it's just this like nice warm felt piano, kind of perfect for this genre in particular because it is so gentle. I mean, soft is in the name, right? So I started with a super simple chord progression in B minor. It's just 4 7th chords in a row, major, minor, major, minor, and it gives it this kind of like sad, but not overly like sappy sad, you know. It's not like rain clouds over my head and like crying while I eat a bowl of ice cream sad. It's more like a light drizzle and kind of walking with my hood off because I don't have the motivation to put it back on, you know? So I believe I actually clicked these notes in just to start with a chord progression I liked. And I went ahead and I added the strum using the Strumizer tool. So if you want to know how to do that, you hit Control A, Alt S, and you can play with this time and velocity knob. But essentially all these do is they, in ascending order, push the start time back and then increase or decrease the velocity as you ascend. So it gives it a little bit more of a humanized feel rather than hammering all the notes at once. It gives you like this glissando effect up the keys. And you end up with something like this. So once I had a chord progression I liked down, I started just sort of fiddling around on the keyboard some more to find a melody that might work with it on top. I highly recommend just like letting a loop play, especially when you're first starting your loop, and just fiddling and seeing what you like. Don't put so much pressure on trying to find the exact right melody right away. Give yourself a few minutes to just play around and really sink into the key signature and sink into the feel you're going for. So in this case, I ended up playing this melody in while I was recording and then doubled the notes and added the lower octave just to sort of give it a little bit more body and a little bit more presence. Together, the piano starts sounding a little bit like this. So now I had some chords, a lead. I needed to find something to sort of fill out the arrangement a little bit more to give it some dimension, some size. And so I decided to add a pad, which really fills up the middle, gives it this like warm, breathy space and makes it feel a little bit less like a person sitting in a room and playing, and more like a universe that you're creating. I'll show you what it sounds like with the pad, and then I'll show you how I made it. So it's really not too in your face. It's not any type of overwhelming. It's just present and gives it a foundation that things are sitting on top of. So one of the tricks I like to use when I'm making my pads is actually using pretty angular oscillators. All these like harsh changes, what those tend to do is add upper resonances. So maybe let me know if you would find it helpful for me to do a whole sound design video. I think diving too deeply into this might be beyond the scope of just explaining how to make sleepy lo-fi. So I'm just going to ask you to trust me when I tell you that the angularity of the oscillator can add higher resonances, which is sort of what distortion does. When you add angularity to the oscillator, isn't necessarily quite like playing a chord, because the core resonant, oh my God, I'm getting too deep into it. I think I'm just gonna make a sound design video because it's fun to talk about. But anyway, just trust me when I tell you that angularity in your oscillators and then low passing them will give you a nice warm sound. This is a great tip for bass tones, and this is a really great tip for pads. So if you don't care about the sound design, you just want nice warm pads, do that. Find a nice angular oscillator, hit it with a pretty aggressive low pass filter, and you'll be very happy. So that's with the filter, this is without the filter. You hear all that high frequency stuff? That's like buzzy, the saw wave. You cut that out with the filter, and you're left with this like nice, almost flute-like sound. So then you can get into putting effects on. This is a relatively simple effects chain here. I basically just got a few things that are giving it dimension, adding voices. These are just my oscillators. And then when you add a filter and a few effects, and feel free to pause the video and copy the knob settings on here. I am certainly not trying to gatekeep anything, but I think I could spend an hour and a half talking to you guys about just this one Serum patch, and there's absolutely no reason to do that in this video. So I'm just gonna kind of gloss over it and tell you the key things. Is that with a pad, you don't want it to be too forward in the mix. The function of the pad, like I said, is to build a foundation, to create a space, to create an atmosphere. One other thing that's a huge tip for when you're designing pads yourself, I've got the attack turned up a little bit. Here it's up to 37 milliseconds. And so all that is stopping it from being like a pluck. So if this were down all the way, you'd hear the moment I hit it, it starts with almost like a percussive click. And that's because the sound wave is picking up immediately. And yeah, I think that's just about everything you need to know for this patch. Let me know if you think a sound design video or a Serum tutorial would be useful. I like talking about this stuff a lot. I'd love to share my thoughts on what little I know about sound design, if there's any interest for it at all. So let me know in the comments. So yeah, once I had the pad, I felt like the atmosphere was sort of starting to come together, and everybody knows that a good lo-fi song needs good drums. The most important thing to think about when you're adding drums to any song is sound selection. And what I mean by that is you need to make sure the kick, the snare, the hi-hat, the cymbals, all of the elements you're adding to the track fit the style of the track and fit with the other sounds. I think this is something that's really easy to overlook, especially as a beginner, because a lot of times you get jumping into music production without really building up your collection of samples. You can listen to tons of music, but it's something that doesn't, I don't think it just really registers to a lot of people that there are so many different characteristics of all these different percussive elements, the attack of a kick, the decay of a kick, the pitch of a kick, the shape of a kick, the length of a kick, all these things that as a music listener, you really don't even notice, because if the music is produced well, the drums just kind of mesh with everything else. In this case, we've got a sleepy, relaxing beat. So we need to make sure we're not picking like heavy trap snares, like really loud, reverbed out, punchy kicks. We don't want like a big splashy high-end crash. Everything's got to be mellow and subdued and relaxed because that's what we're trying to make. For example, I've got one of my favorites, I think you guys are going to see this on my channel a lot, is Mondo Loop's Kick. I think it was from his dusty, dreamy lo-fi hip-hop samples, the free version. You can hear that it's just this nice subdued, soft kick with a good bassy presence that won't eat through your whole track. It won't blow your eardrums out, but it still gives you that, like the heartbeat of the song that you need to help push it forward. So this is also from Mondo Loop's pack. This might just be a Mondo Loop's advertisement, I guess. This hi-hat, similar thing, just really gentle, really soft. As you can see, I've actually got a decent number of layers, the percussion in this section, or in this loop, in this song, in this. There's a lot of percussion. Because I find that a lot of times with the sleepy genre, it becomes really tempting to add melodic elements to fill up what is otherwise an empty mix. And I think that if you can get a good amount of perks and some interesting things happening, it can help fill up your mix without overcrowding the melody. Some of the ways that I sort of tried to take advantage of that is I went for a little bit more of an interesting hi-hat pattern rather than just, autofill 2 here. Another tip is by adding this extra cymbal, I've got the pulse that we usually want out of a hi-hat, which gives me a little bit more freedom to play with this other hi-hat. So another trick I used was, rather than just having single snare hits or some flams, I decided to sort of manually input what would be like a delay with the velocity adjustments on my snare. Like a real person playing a snare. You can listen to most of the percussion. I want to show you one more thing after this. So one other trick that I actually really like in my percussion elements is adding randomized delay to what would otherwise just be straight quarter notes. So for this example, I've got this wood perk sound. As it is right now, it sounds okay. It's not amazing, but it's decent. Not too interesting by itself, even really in the context of the beat. It's just it marches, So something that can really spice up any percussive element. I do this to hi-hats, I do this to snares, I do this to perks, is get this free plugin Magic Dice by Baby Audio. This plugin is amazing, and it's literally just randomized delay. You have almost no control over it whatsoever, so it really ends up giving you some cool inspiration. It's a good source for doing things that you wouldn't normally do, because I find that when you're using the same plugins and you know all the controls really well, it's super easy to fall into habits and just always put in the same settings, use the same presets. So something like this, that you just hit a button and it gives you what it gives you, can really introduce you to some things that you probably wouldn't have stumbled upon otherwise. It totally transforms the rhythm. I probably never would have put that into the MIDI. I never would have played that, and I think it totally transforms where the song ended up going. Like that. So I highly recommend giving that a try. It's totally free. This video is not sponsored, though. Let me know if you're interested. Baby Audio, a little collab. DMs are open. No, I have 60 subscribers. Who's gonna? I have 59 subscribers. Do you think Baby Audio is gonna hit up some guy with 59 subscribers? No. But if you hit the subscribe button, maybe one day they will. So, if you're getting any value out of this video, if this video is helpful at all, if you are finding it entertaining, think about hitting that subscribe button. That is also totally free. And I will be posting new videos every single week on something related to music. Sometimes it'll be educational and useful, and sometimes it will not. So yeah, at this point, I had pretty much had a good loop. I knew that I like this loop. I'm going to turn it into a song. There's another tip for you. Do not be afraid to walk away from a loop. If you spend 30 minutes, 2 hours, 3 days making a loop and you hate it, leave it. Forget about it. Make a new one. So often, I get stuck in this loop of listening to the loop, and you just get sick of it, and then your creativity is completely gone, your inspiration's sucked away, and then whatever you end up turning into is half-assed at best. If you're working through a loop and you like it, keep going, but if you get sick of the loop and you're not having fun making it, I highly recommend you close the project and either start a new one or get up, take a break, take a walk around, drink some water, maybe some tea, go focus on something else for 5 minutes and come back and start fresh. Because this is supposed to be enjoyable. Like, you should be enjoying the process, because the enjoyment you're getting out of making the song is going to come through the song. But anyway, back to how you can make loops you enjoy. Wow, I hope this is some kind of helpful. As I'm recording this, it's a complete and total mess. I don't think it's going to be any different in the actual video. So thank you if you've been watching to this point. You're a real one. The videos will get better eventually, I'm sure. So yeah, at this point, I knew I had a loop that I liked and that I was going to turn it into a full song. And I was thinking that things still felt a little bit empty in the actual melody. So I decided I wanted to add what's called a counter melody. And so all that is basically just another lead part, another moving part in the space that the melody occupies, which can do calls and responses with the melody, or just sort of fill in space, either sonically or literally space between times when the melody isn't playing. So for this song, I chose this cool little slide, which is none other than my friend Serum. I promise I will not go on a tirade about this patch. All you need to know is for this slide effect, I checked always and turned up the porto, which means portamento. It's just a word for sliding expression. Long story short, I used that same technique. Angular oscillators, low pass. This one's a little bit less harsh than the pad was. Pretty similar effects chains. Feel free to pause this, copy the settings if you're interested in anything like that. And yeah, we'll keep on keeping on. So I came up with this counter melody on this slide synth, which I think sort of filled out that top line pretty nicely. And of course, I needed to add some bass. So just like with the drums, you need to make sure that your sound selection on your bass is also matching the vibe you're going for. So in this case, I took an 808 and did a little bit of magic to it to try to turn it into something that would fit a sleepy lo-fi song. So the 808 I started with sounded like this. It had a long decay, a little bit of a clicky attack, and a lot of sort of just sine wave, very pure bass. You want the low end to feel like you're just sinking into a nice, comfy, lazy boy or something like that. So the approach I took to turn this sort of sine wavy 808 into something a little bit warmer and more full was I started with 2 instances of Destructor with the filter, chorus, and speaker turned off. So essentially it's just a distortion plugin, just adding saturation, a little bit of upper resonances. And now, again, depending what kind of speakers you're listening onto, it sounds aggressive up in the high end. It's piercing and it's not a nice noise at all. So then I add this EQ and just saw the top end off and threw on a fruity limiter as a compressor with a really low threshold and a pretty strong compression ratio and a really short little attack time to just squish down those harsh frequencies as the bass comes in. Altogether, my verse loop ended up sounding like this. once you have a loop that you like, you need to break out of loop stage, and that's where arranging comes in. So the way I like to think about arranging is really about the energy and the dynamics I'm going for. So essentially, you have a loop, which should probably be either the climax or pretty close to the most energetic part of your song. Or at least that's what usually ends up happening with mine. I guess anything's possible, everyone has their own style. This is definitely not a set of rules, just tips for you. So for me, my loops often end up being the most energetic or the climactic part of my song, or in this case, essentially a verse. And then with my arrangements, I'm thinking about what do I want the energy arc of the song to look like. So for this one, for example, I knew I wanted to start off with a really mellow intro and then have the energy climb as I got through the intro into a first peak here and kind of stay up here for a little bit before it falls off, not quite as low as the intro for a little bit in this like bridge section. And then I wanted to climb to the true climax of the song before it fell off all the way back down to the starting energy. So it was like this double hump is what I was going for. The way I like to do that is by essentially dragging just a few of the parts earlier and later to end up with an arrangement that makes sense to fit your energy curve that you're going for. I think that's sort of a helpful way to visualize the way I like to do it. So once you've got your energy curve figured out, you can actually use, I highly recommend using effect automation to really solidify those energetic shifts for tracks. But for this song, I started off with just absolutely cranked reverb on my keys, which came in the second half, and a nice slow master volume fade in. And then another thing I like to play with is sort of picking some of the more simple percussive elements out of my percussion loop to just come in at the beginning and then maybe persist throughout the song during that second energy lull before everything actually comes back in together. And then one final element worth pointing out here is for lo-fi in particular, something that's super useful for setting the scene and creating an atmosphere is actually this Foley ambience stuff, which in this case is a bunch of fire and rain samples from cymatics. Essentially, this is here for two purposes. A big thing with lo-fi, and especially my production, is you cut a lot of the high end out of most of your percussive elements and most of your instruments as well, because high end can just be kind of draining on the ears, and a big focus of this genre is to be comfortable background music, right? You know, lo-fi music to study to, music to sleep to. So you don't want things that are piercing and draining and tiring to listen to. So you cut a lot of the high end out of your instruments. And so these fire and rain and vinyl crackle sounds can do a good job of filling in that high end so it doesn't feel empty or weird without it, without being too draining on the ear. So I definitely recommend putting things in like that, but you do want to be careful not to have it be too overboard, because that can also be fatiguing to listen to. When all of those elements come together, you end up with this nice, peaceful, simple, slow intro into your peaceful, simple, relaxing song. So one challenge with transitioning between energy is actually how to do that smoothly. And so something that's really important for doing that is literally called transition noises. One of the most popular tools to do this with is actually just taking a crash cymbal, throwing some reverb on it, reversing that, and then letting that reverse play as a swell. But in this case, I ended up just doing a kind of combination of white noise and a reverse crash leading into that first drop, along with this little rhythmic riser from Mondo Loops pack. What these can do is just sort of like prime your ears for a change. So here's what it sounds like with the risers, and then I'll show you what they sound like without it. Without them, it just sort of punches out of nowhere, right? So we've got there's no transition of energy. There's not really even a build-up. There's no anticipation factor. I highly recommend using transition sounds. They're really easy to make. Let me know actually if you want just these. Maybe shoot me a DM on Instagram at it's me, Luke D. I'll be happy to send you a couple of these that I've made myself if you don't feel like making them. Or let me know if you want to see a video where I show you how to make them. And yeah, I think that pretty much covers the bulk of this track. The one thing I haven't had a chance to go over yet is my favorite element of this track, and it's what I ended up doing with the guitars. So these didn't come out until I already had the whole beat arranged and I was listening back, and I thought that it just needed a little bit something extra. So I'm just going to really quickly go into what each guitar is doing. I'm probably not going to dive too much into the effects chain, but let me know if you want to know how I mix my guitars. Again, I'd be happy to make a video about that as well. So the first guitar comes in halfway through the intro at a really low volume, just sort of plucking along with, not quite the root notes, but plucking along with the chords in like a quarter note fashion. So it's really low in the mix. You probably can barely hear it unless you know it's there, but I think it just sort of helps introduce it as an element early, so it's not kind of coming out of nowhere later. And similarly, I had the second guitar coming in the first drop. Just to start introducing the more melodic parts of the guitar that come in a little bit later. So as that verse continues, each of them get louder as we go on and eventually build up to their first drop, which is when that first energy dip of the song happens. Some of the percussion falls out. We have another transition sound. The lead and the bass fall out. And it's really just the slide that continues while the guitar just takes over the show. One tip I like to offer for anyone looking to add guitar to their sleepy lo-fi tracks is to think of the guitar as the singer, right? They're the center of attention, basically. Like, they become the voice of the song. So allow it to have expression, allow it to dance around a little bit, you know, fall in and out of the pocket. And then I always think doing some call and response work can go a really long way, just the same way that a backing vocal does. With all that in mind, I did a little bit of magic with some delays and some reverb mixing, and I ended up with one of my favorite little guitar sections that I've made on a track so far. So with that, I'm going to let this play us out. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like. Let me know in the comments what videos you want to see me make next. I think I suggested like 15 different videos in this video. So if one of them sound interesting to you or they might be helpful, please let me know. I'd be happy to make it. I'm on my road to my first 100 subscribers. So every subscriber really means so much to me. I think that's pretty much all I've got. So I'm going to let Cosmic Cushion play us out, and I will see you guys back here next week. Peace.